Okay folks, it's time to talk about Marc Maron, because this comedian slash podcaster has been getting away with his trickery for far too long. So everyone knows the Marc Maron story about being a bitter stand-up who burnt many bridges and eventually started a podcast to confront his many gripes, and how that became a massive success after Marc thought his career was dead in the water. But how did Marc ever turn into this resentful person he used to be to begin with? While Marc will tell you all about his dealings with drugs and crazy comedians like Sam Kinison, he's been very tight-lipped about his origins before comedy. Well, it won't surprise any of you to know Marc was originally pursuing music, and if you listen to his podcast, you definitely know this as he ends every episode by jamming on his guitar. But long before Marc graced the stage with his comedic rants, he was rocking out with his band Community Spirit. And in the late 80s, his band starts gaining some traction with a new grungy spiritual sound, and it's at this point that a few labels start approaching the band to sign a real deal. Well, as has happened many times, the band internally disagrees whether to take the deal or not, with Marc being the only one who thought they should wait. Well, instead of supporting the actual founder of this band, Marc, the other guys opted to sign the deal without him. And with Marc owning the name Community Spirit, the band changed their name to something similar, Collective Soul. And by 1992, the band minus Marc was huge. Now this would mark the first of many times that some type of shady business would occur that cut Marc out of his own deal. So once Collective Soul blows up, Marc fell into a depression, which makes total sense. But this is where Marc turns to drugs for the first time, finding that cocaine would lift his spirits, even if only temporarily. And after becoming a regular user of this drug, Marc started finding himself in locations he never thought he would have been. Terrifying places like musical improv shows. And if you don't know what that is, it's the only art form lower than improv that sees would-be musical theater performers run onto stage with zero material and make up songs on the spot as if that's funny. But the coked up Marc saw this as a unique challenge and soon found himself on stage outperforming everyone. And soon, Marc's love of performing music on stage developed into a love of doing cocaine and screaming on stage. And in the early 90s, this was all the rage, and Marc quickly landed a TV gig on Comedy Central's short attention span theater. So it seemed Marc had made it. He was now a TV show host and assumed he would just move up the ranks like all his predecessors. But he once again found that being cutthroat is how people actually advance. You see, while hosting this TV show, Marc had been writing a kids sitcom to sell to Nickelodeon. But after showing it to a producer on his show, he was horrified to find out his idea was stolen when Nickelodeon started airing My Brother and Me. And Marc did try to fight this in court, claiming he was the one who came up with the concept of these two young black brothers and their friend Goo. But in that era, before everything was written on computers, Marc was unable to prove that he was the original creator. And soon after this, Marc lost his TV show host position and found himself jobless and desperate. He couldn't prove it, but he felt as if he had now been blacklisted in Hollywood and found it impossible to land any worthwhile jobs. So much so that Marc was forced to choose between working at his local grocery store or taking the role of rock and roll ghost on a low-budget kids show. Well, cocaine ain't cheap, so Marc took the job as flabber on Big Bad Beetleborgs for 2 seasons. And it's safe to say the amount of blow he was doing left Marc with zero memories of even being on this show. And it's after Big Bad Beetleborgs is canceled that Marc goes back to stand-up comedy full-time. He had to stick to a career that would allow him to continue to snort snow. But as we all know, you can only push your own feelings away for so long, and eventually even the cocaine couldn't lift Marc's spirits. He had reached rock bottom and had nowhere to turn. And this is where it gets weird. For most people, when you reach drug addiction's rock bottom, it's a slow rebuilding of your life if you even get that chance. But somehow Marc goes from absolute addiction and eviction to having a hit podcast before people even knew what podcasts were. Well, there's only one possible explanation. That's right, Magellan. You see, apparently the Magellan Corporation had been keeping an eye on Marc and were just waiting for him to have nowhere else to turn. And this is a classic Magellan tactic. They'll wait until you're about to jump off a bridge and then offer a lifeline, securing that you have nowhere to go without them. And so Marc apparently signed with Magellan under the condition that Collective Soul would be taken down. And you'll notice ever since 2006 when Marc signed with Magellan, guitar-based music has been on a steady decline. Well, this is no coincidence. Magellan has made good on their deal with Marc by slowly removing any rock from the radio. But as you've heard, the unintended consequences have left most Americans wishing they could go back in time if only for one more day to hear POD on the radio. So in a shocking genie-like twist, Marc's wish to destroy Collective Soul collectively stole rock and roll from our souls. Even the world's most respected guitarist Steve Vai has been banned from playing the instrument, forcing him to create his own wild musical machine called the Hydra. And even Marc's podcast only makes sense in the context of the powerful Magellan Magellan Corporation. Just think about it. How would an unsuccessful comedian get people who he's offended to volunteer their time to come to his garage and talk about their beef? It just doesn't make sense. Unless every guest is forced there by Magellan. And it's even rumored that everyone who's appeared on Mark's show is actually blackmailed into this position, not wanting their poop-eating videotapes to get out. And to those who say this is a far-fetched idea, fine, go on believing the President of the United States met up with this unknown comedian in his garage to record themselves talking. And there's plenty more controversies that Magellan has helped Mark cover up, like the time he slapped Brandy in the face at the Gospel Lyrics Awards show, or the many reports of Flabber, the Jay Leno/Elvis-inspired ghost being seen walking the streets of LA. But we'll have to save that for another time. Until then, Marc Maron, you're a total bitch. Okay everyone, if you're keeping up, I'm on the run from the Austin Mafia in the mountains, and unfortunately, after rewiring this antenna tower, it seems to have overcharged and sparked a fire. While this is generally a negative thing, this smoke might provide me some much needed cover from Tony and the goons. My plan is to light 1 or 2 more mountains on fire to throw them off the trail, and then head for the ocean. TB Nation, things are heating up.